Yes, welcome back. And no, it's not toxic masculinity because I didn't sit up behind her without her consent. So, I got approval. All right.
He asked first, he's a gentleman.
And again, we're not twinning for no reason. I used to love her. That's the official merch for the scale. You can't see Ayana's shirt, but it's a little different. Y'all can get these in different colors. And I already said her name, so y'all know my special guest is back. But y'all can cop the merch on raprouleur.com. Go hit that link and continue to like and subscribe if you haven't. And we are going to get into the Category 2 review, which is the rap performance on this album that we're talking about, which is none other than Young, Rich, and Dangerous by Kriss Kross, continuing our 1996 all-year campaign, actually bringing it to a close. Yeah. All right. So the first dimension when we talk about the rap performance is going to be Dimension 1, personality and charisma. How much personality and charisma did Chris Smith and Chris Kelly exhibit on here?
I'm gonna say not that much, and I don't know if it's because you're so used to them being the boys from Jump, Jump, and being really excited, and then you get to this album, they're more mellowed out, you know, more grown, I guess. So in terms of charisma, it was standard.
One thing that I noticed, they're kind of indistinguishable to the casual listener. If you are a Kriss Kross fan, you're able to tell them apart vocally. But on wax, we're talking about Jermaine Dupri's pen being behind 90 to 95% of this album. And so it's one voice speaking. And I think a lot of times it gives a homogenized effect between the two Chris's. And there's a lot of times, even when I was like analytically listening, unless they say I'm the Mac Daddy or the Daddy Mac, or they say their government names, I'm like, which one is this now? The cadences are very similar. We'll talk about that in a second. And so, you know, I think you get glimpses of personality when they start talking about their unique place in the industry on songs like the title track and Live and Die for Hip Hop, but you're not getting a lot of room to see who they are individually. But that's something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. You have their guests who show a little bit more personality. Mr. Black has a lot of aggressive, older G personality. The Brat spills personality and everything. The moment you hear one syllable on the mic from the Brat, her personality's there. Even Jermaine Dupri himself comes in with his, you know, I'm gonna make y'all dance attitude, and you get that. But what would you give this on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats?
2. I would like to see more charisma for them. I would like to see more of their personality shine through these songs, but I just think they kind of dropped the ball on that.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Chris Kelly, of course, and Chris Terry while I'm at it. Respect to their family. That takes us to Dimension 2. The believability or the suspension of disbelief, right? So this is not an album that's asking you for suspension of disbelief. They're not going into any characters. Again, they're saying their government names all throughout the album. They're talking about their unique place in the industry and things they want to do. So that just leaves us with believability. How much do you believe the Chris's on this album? The fact that I just mentioned this is mostly written by Jermaine Dupri. As a matter of fact, Daddy Mac is not credited at all with any writing anywhere on this album. Mac Daddy gets 2 writing credits on the 2 songs that Kriss Kross produced. And I don't know if that means Mac Daddy wrote Daddy Mac's verses or Chris Terry helped write Daddy Mac's verses, or if they're getting writing credits as producers, but this is still Jermaine Dupri writing. So they're speaking through him, or he's speaking through them, depending on how you view it. And that already is going to take away some of the believability. How much can you believe words written by a man for another man, or for another person for another person? I would say they stay in their lane. You know, we talked about this in category 1. You're not hearing anything outlandish, super gangster, super out of the realm of reality for 17, 16-year-olds who kind of grew up in the industry. It's all about having money, getting women, and staying safe. Anything to say on the believability here?
So even though these songs are necessarily written by them, you can tell they were tailored for them. You can tell maybe they took some of their experiences. Once again, they were a very poppin' group from Atlanta, so there's no doubt that they didn't give women. That part is believable. So I would give them a 3. It's believable. It just, you know, didn't get to write that much material speaking from their own experiences.
Yeah, and it's all successful performers who make their career off of words that they didn't necessarily write. There has to be something said for the amount of talent it takes to pull it off in a way that's digestible. Some people you just don't believe in for your game. Lil' Kim, Dr. Dre, these are people that famously didn't write their own rhymes, but they were able to pull it off well. And then you get people like Diddy, where you don't believe it the moment he opens his mouth. It's like, okay, Diddy, we know you didn't write this, and we know you don't. This ain't even you. But you know, Kriss Kross, Jermaine Dupri is really good at writing in a way. We'll talk about this. I keep bringing it up before it's time, but writing in a way where it also sounds easy to believe that they would have wrote it themselves, because it's not this hyper lyrical material at all. It's stuff that if I was writing at 16 and I'm from Atlanta, I'd probably be saying in 1996. So something for you all to consider on a scale of 1 to 5. ARnB gives it a 3. Okay, speaking of 3, dimension 3. This is the use of voice and the delivery. How are the raps delivered? How well were they delivered? How are the voices used here? You mentioned the word mellow.
Yeah, it was mellow, and I was actually having a hard time telling the Krisses apart when they were rapping. So I think if any time were a perfect time for their personality to shine through, this would have been it.
Yeah, even Chris Terry, when he's on, he doesn't have this super distinct voice from them where it's like gruff or it's higher or no inflection that's really like super different from what they were doing. So it just seemed like, you know, 3 teenagers named Chris, but any of them could have been rapping any of the others' verses. I think there was this deliberate intent to sound mellow, again, coming off of Snoop influence, and being that, what'd you call it, G-Funk PG, G-Funk Junior.
G-Funk PG-13.
What comes through a lot is the coolness, how cool they wanted you to know they were. So I hear the coolness in the verses. Sometimes it sounds like projected coolness, sometimes it sounds like natural coolness, because let's not forget, dudes had swag, even when they were little kids. You know, when they came, you know, thumbing their noses, you know, cuts in the eyebrow, the way they were able to deliver the lines is what makes you buy into it, you know, and you hear that through the way they spit. And I heard coolness to the point where it's like, okay, these dudes might really do what they're doing. They might really get women, as Ayana pointed out, because it's just like, macking ain't a thing. And if you're as the women like to say, living your truth, it's gonna shine through no matter who wrote it for you. So a lot of mellow projection here, a lot of that South meets West. Nothing here is distinctly Atlanta, and nothing here is like they're biting California, but you get that there was an influence because of that G-Funk Junior. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, what you giving this on delivery and use of voice?
A little bit too.
2, wow. All right, dimension 4, the flow. The flow. There's moments where it's really fluid, and there's even elements of like a pickup flow, like Danny Mac's verse on Live and Die for Hip Hop and Mac Daddy's verse. They come in and Jermaine Dupri writes some of the most packed bars to the point where I think maybe the Brat, again, I think her ghost pen was at work here because it picks up more the way the Brat would. The Brat puts more syllables in her verses. Like there's a point where he's, you know, the first verse, he's like, put my pants on back because I wanted to be different. And you know, that pause and that pickup, that's writing right there. That's not, you know, I do what I do because I came from, you know, it's not this paint by numbers flow. And you're getting some of the best of that on that track.
They had certain songs where, like you said, Live and Die for Hip Hop, that their flow on that was cool. The rest of the songs, though, they didn't really have.
You're gonna get just different variables of fluidity throughout the album. More syllables on certain songs. Very easy to listen to patterns, but nothing that's really, you know, out of the times. We can probably name several rappers in that year that rap similar to how Kriss Kross was rapping on this album. It's no standout pattern, but it's somewhere in between a Snoop influence circa 95 going into 96 and Jermaine Dupri, which, you know, funny enough, Jermaine Dupri wrote for himself on Live and Die Hip Hop in a flow that I guess to make himself stand out from the Krisses. You know, he did this, I want you to feel me. My whole thing is to get inside your body. That was his whole pattern for his 8 bars. And his lines were pretty simplistic, and I was like, it doesn't sound as good when he does it for himself, but you know, he knows how to write for them. And so I think either that's genius or laziness. I don't know, but something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, what are you giving the flow?
I will give it was standard, I'll give it a 3.
Dimension 5, the wordplay and bar intent. Are you getting wordplay and, yeah.
Not that I could tell. There wasn't anything that was very clever about some of their lyrics. So
yeah, I couldn't really go any further than that with trying to understand or trying to describe if you derive any intent from the lyrics here. They're just kind of going with the flow, living wherever, you know, they go. There's moments when they talk about their place in the industry where you'll hear them talk about their aspirations, but there's no trickery. There's no lyrical trickery going here. Everything is pretty as it is. It's pretty straightforward, not a lot of rhetorical devices used at all. Not even a lot of simile or yeah, definitely no metaphor. So, I mean, yeah, if y'all find wordplay, please let us know. Something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, Ayana, what are you giving wordplay and bar intent?
I hate to say it, but like a 1.5.
1.5. Wow. Love to hear what y'all put down. That takes us to dimension 6. Punchlines or poetic wisdom and overall quotability. So I mentioned that there are punchlines here because there's a limited use of simile. I don't think you're getting any memorable punchlines. The brat comes in and you know, making more sense than common. You're gonna get lines like that. And you might get lines like that from the Krisses. Mr. Black has a couple lines. You know, gunpowder chowder. He says some things on Mac and Ain't Easy that are slick. You're getting slick talk here. We talked about slick talk when we talked about the Diddy album, and that's the extent of things here. Whatever Jermaine Dupri, whatever his mind can produce along with the guest on here. But the extent of that is real rudimentary stuff that, you know, most rappers would reach for. Low-hanging fruit. Yeah, did you hear any punchlines on here that I may have missed?
No, I think you said it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not all of them. Again, you'll find them. It's just not what this album relies on in any of the verses or hooks. Roll me a mic and let me smoke it till I'm high. That's the only metaphor you get, which was still clever. It's pretty clever and catchy to put as your hook too. I always thought that was like the speculation at the time. I remember people say, oh, they really trying to be grown now. They talk about weed it's just a code word for weed. I'm like, no, I think the weed was the code or the metaphor for how much they love hip hop. They get high off hip hop. Clever, cute, and appealed to backpack sensibilities and radio sensibilities. Because around that time, that's what the backpack rappers were saying. I live for the real hip hop. I don't know if backpackers were blasting that, but I do think secretly they would all admit to having that song in their playlist at the very least. Poetic wisdom. I do, I don't know if people think of Kriss Kross to go and seek for any poetic wisdom or words to live by, but I do want to shout them out for the angle that they took on the streets ain't right, because taking the angle of, I'm getting jacked, I'd rather give up what they're asking for and live another day. We hadn't heard that sentiment since Warren G came out with Regulate. Some dudes came to me, so I said, I'm stuck. Right? You're not hearing that in hip hop. Most people are like, yeah, I had my strap and I told them to step up. Like, you didn't. On both verses, both Krisses are like, they, as the memes would say, they did not choose violence today. They did not wake up and choose violence. What do you have to say about punchlines and poetic wisdom here? Or poetic wisdom?
I will give it a 3.
Okay. 3. All right. Something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, dimension 7. Concepts. Being young, rich, and dangerous could be considered a loose concept. The Romy and Mike Lemmy smoking some line, making that kind of the basis for that, even though it's a loose conceptual hook. Streets ain't right. It's more of a straightforward story than a concept. Mac it ain't easy. Not sure if you get any concepts on here. If y'all felt like there were concepts on this album or conceptual material, please leave the comments below on raprouleur.com, and something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 8 and Dimension 9. This is where we get into the content. So you got your externalized content, which is how much are the Krisses talking about things outside of themselves, issues in the world outside of them or the world that they have to live in, meaning the streets, the government, life in general, the industry, and internally, how much were they talking about things autobiographically?
I feel like the whole album is autobiographically. Although they do talk about the streets and they talk about the industry, it's how it relates to them. So
right. Again, on the 2 songs about their place in the business, Young, Rich, and Dangerous, and Live and Die for Hip Hop, they do get a little introspective, talking about how fame happened, how long they had been making money, how they had to grow up fast, how they went from being in a classroom. That's probably the only time where they do shout out some real Atlanta stuff, when they're talking about driving down certain roads, or they mention the high school that they used to go to, or the middle school they were going to, and how it switched to being on the road. There's a line where they talk about being on the road, having a tutor, and then just having money and being okay. And then again, the aspirations talk. Here's where I want to be. I want to be a young Berry Gordy. You get some of that. So I'd say that's internalized and externalized, because they're talking about where they are in the business and how that affected their life and their worldview. And then Streets Ain't Right. I know I keep talking about this song, but it's a commentary on the streets, but then it's also their place. Now, I'm not that. I'm gonna pack this gun just to be safe. Hope I never have to use it. I am not a thug. I'm not trying to be a thug. I know I'm a rich celebrity. I know I'm a target. And it's messed up. It has to be this way. Content on both angles, externalized and internalized. And on a short album like this, that kind of feels like, oh, maybe, brothers are talking about something. The way they talk about women, did you hear any variation in the songs about, picking up women or girls? You got Mac It Ain't Easy, you got some Cut Up, you got Tonight's the Night. Some Cut Up was just about that. Some Cut Up was come over and let's get down. Tonight's the Night was more about like, come kick it at this party with us. You know, tonight's the night that I call up the and all that I roll with, right? They start calling women hoes a little bit on this album. We can attribute that to some of that G-Funk influence, but they tried. Mac and Ain't Easy is more about not staying with one woman, being young, having options. So there's different tones and angles that they come at the content from, but you really would have to be paying a lot of attention to it. Probably doing my job to really catch on to when you give in the content dimensions 8 and 9, both. So each on a scale from 1 to 5. Something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. The externalized content, the internalized content.
Externalized, and you gave it a 2.5. Internalized content, I'm gonna give it a 3.5.
Oh wow, okay. So we got a little something, not a lot of personality from them, but a little introspection.
Yeah, a little introspection. Even if it is about how they get women on dates.
Takes us to the final dimension, dimension 10, storytelling. Any storytelling on here?
Not too much storytelling.
Right, they tell the story of their time growing up in the industry.
Right.
And Streets Ain't Right, 2 story verses. There's my verse about running into some hood friction, how I got out of it, and here's my verse about how I ran into some hood friction, how I got out of it. Sometimes when they talk about women, they talk about them in a narrative context, like I met this, you know, I told her this, I did that. So there's lots of storytelling here. I don't know if it's genius storytelling, I don't know if it's memorable storytelling, but it exists and it's prominent on this album. There's a lot. Most of the rap on here is in storytelling format, now that I think about it, which is probably why we don't get a lot of simile and metaphor and tricky, you know, slippy lyrical devices or rhetorical devices here. So it's up to you all to determine how good the storytelling is on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Now y'all know what we're giving the storytelling. Let's wrap it up and take us home.
Because when you say it like that, it's like, okay, there is some storytelling, it's just the story that they're actually telling. And like you said, how good is it? So I would say it's a 3.
3. Okay. I saw that one coming this time. Yeah. So that has been our category 2 review of the album from 1996 to finish out our 1996 for the rest of the year campaign. Young, Rich, and Dangerous by Kriss Kross, their 3rd and final album as Kriss Kross. Rest in peace to Chris Kelly, Mac Daddy, and yeah.
Like the channel, subscribe, and hit the notification button.
Right. Y'all understand we're still building this global hip hop community. So until then,
F a Rap Critic.
we talk about it while I live it. Word to the mouth.